Hello and welcome to Talking Sense, hosted by myself, Nisha, and my co-host, Syra. Today we welcome Louise Dawson, inclusion specialist with over 2 decades of experience in education, a Senko lead. Louise is a consultant and provides such great expertise to families and schools. Louise has been a key speaker at many international conferences. Louise is a huge advocate for raising awareness around inclusion for the neurodiverse community and comes with a vast amount of experience, both personally and professionally. Absolutely amazing. Thanks, Louise.
Amazing. Hi, Louise. Welcome to Talking Sense.
Hi. Thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome, and thank you for coming today to share your expertise with us and to talk to us a little bit about what your background is and how we can help the community. So Nisha shared with us a lot of information and achievements. It's a huge success you have so far in your career. So with a lot of our community, specifically transitioning into and having inclusion into mainstream schools, could you share with us what your motivation was to kind of take upon that career?
Certainly can. Thank you very much. So I went to school in the UK, and I think that back then we didn't talk about our conditions. We didn't even know that we had conditions, and I didn't do very well at school. So then I went off into the world of work. I started work at 15 and went into industry. I spent 20 years working, and that took me overseas. I lived in Hong Kong for 8 years. I was very successful in business, became a managing director of a company, and then I started my own business in Hong Kong. And then I had my children. And as so often happens, life completely changes when you have children, especially when they are on the spectrum or when they have differences and difficulties that actually we knew nothing about as new parents. And I still find that today. And that my motivation is, if we are sitting in class with children who are diverse, whether they are physically disabled or have neurodiversity, whatever barriers and challenges, if we have inclusion, our children of today are our adults of tomorrow, and then we won't face the same challenges that we currently still do as parents. So when you have children with any kind of difference, 1, you're not expecting it. 2, you don't know how to deal with it. 3, there's so much knowledge that you have to gain and learn, and the grief process that you have to get over.
Yeah.
If we can eliminate that by having inclusion in schools for our children today, we won't have those challenges in the future. So that's kind of my motivation. I have 3 children. They are all on the spectrum somewhere, and they're all diverse and different of their own, they're all just young people. They've all grown up. I went back into school at the age of 35 as a teaching assistant. Then I became a qualified teacher. Then I became a Senko and a head of inclusion. I moved out here to the Middle East in 2012. I've led provision in 3 premium schools here in the UAE. Followed the whole transition for the UAE and the amazing work that the government are doing to highlight these challenges, and teacher training and the way that schools have shifted have been a huge part of the schools that I've worked in, not all schools, and developed communities of people who are educators who are interested in supporting our children. Been here 13 years now. 3 years ago, started my own business, supporting children, parents, teachers, Senkos, heads of inclusion, and even a little bit of work in the government as well. Yeah,
absolutely covers
the spectrum.
Yeah, there isn't anybody untouched, is there?
Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting what you mentioned there about having, the community around us, it needs to change so everyone feels included. And you mentioned there the grief process of, when people are having children, embarking on families, you have this kind of view in your head of what your family is going to look like, what your children are going to do. And when that doesn't happen, it can feel, like you said, like you're having to almost let go of what the ideal was and then accept the new. But if we had a community that, just accepted everyone, we wouldn't have those really strict kind of rigid ideas in our head. So I think that's a really interesting concept. You've mentioned there, obviously, your experience in the schools over here in the UAE. Something that I know our community struggles with, and I personally have as well, is about picking and choosing the right school for your child with additional needs, whatever they may look like. Can you just tell us a little bit about what type of things we should be looking for or questions we should be asking schools?
I think one of the reasons I work among the different groups of society, so from children through parents through teachers, is because I have been that person at all stages. So I'm neurodiverse, I've been a parent, I've been a teacher, so I have all of those experiences. So when I look at the difficulties in finding a school, that's where everybody has to come together. So it's difficult because unless you're in a special school or a school that is specifically catering for the needs of a section of the population, like a hearing impairment school or a vision impairment school, when you've got to look at diversity, you have to have balance. And in the Middle East, that's even more difficult because of culture, because of language, because there's so many different ingredients that go into a successful classroom. If you have a classroom full of children who have lower cognitive ability, then they're easy to manage and it's easy to, cater for their needs. If you've got children who don't speak English, children who are autistic, children who have ADHD, children who have a vision impairment, hearing impairment, all in one environment, that makes it very difficult for one teacher to manage.
Absolutely.
So therefore, schools do have to place a limit on the number of children with second language. And that's the difficulty here. We're not just catering to special needs children, we are catering to all children. So schools find that difficult, teachers find that difficult. As a teacher, I found that difficult. So the priority has to be on meeting the needs of the children. And if a school says they can't meet the needs of the children, don't question it. They know their cohort, they know their context. But it does limit the number of places in a classroom for high needs children. If you are a dyslexic and you are managing without support and you don't need an LSA and you don't need a lot of curriculum adaptation, that's fine. We can cope. If you have a child who is running out into the car park or is hiding in the toilet for 3 hours, that needs supervision. And that's where the additional adult has to come into play, which is the most contentious and difficult part of educating children in a mainstream environment. So did you ask me what parents should do, or did you?
More, I was asking just about what, like you said, don't question the school. If they say they can't meet the needs, move on and go to another school. So if you know kind of what your child may need, and at that point when you're searching, you might not know because they might not have been in that setting. So it's more like what kind of questions should they be asking? Is there a certain plan they have to follow? Is there certain guidance that they should be looking at? What would you say their first point of call should be?
Yeah. So as a consultant that's supporting families finding places, and I cannot guarantee a place because I'm not in control of admissions or in control of schools. So when I start to work with the family, I work out what the needs of the child are. I'll meet the child, and your educational psychologist or your occupational therapist, they can also do this work. It's not just me in the community, definitely. So speak and find out what they need and have realistic expectation. If you are told that your child needs educational psychologists know what's going on in classrooms. So work out what they need. Then you have to decide which schools you want based on curriculum, based on fee, based on location, based on the expertise of the team in the school. And so you narrow it down. And then I typically get to 3 or 4 schools that meet the criteria of me and my family.
Okay.
When I've got my 3 or 4 schools, I'm then going to try and make an appointment with the head of inclusion. Right. Every school by law has to have a head of inclusion. And then I'm going to build relationship with them. And they are going to say, right now, we can't cope. Okay. Because right now, the situation in the city is, we have become very well known for our inclusion. Our schools are brilliant at what they do. We have some of the most specialised heads of inclusion I have ever worked with. I learn from them every day. We do have massive expertise in the city, but that makes us a very popular location to bring children to. So build a relationship with the head of inclusion, attend events, those public events like winter festivals, get known, get a reputation for being supportive of the school, okay? And then when you've got that relationship, they will then say to you, we've got a place coming up, get yourself down to admissions and pay the fees, and do it in a more strategic way rather than just... I'm working with a family at the moment who have been declined from 58 schools because over the summer, specialists haven't been here. They're allowed to take a holiday.
Yeah, of course.
They aren't here, so they've applied in the summer. They've sent out lots and lots of applications and they've all just come back and said, no, at the moment we can't manage. And that is absolutely destroying. Okay, so strategic, slow, steady. In the meantime, look for alternative provisions. There are many places in Dubai where you can go for a couple of hours a day. But education is not just in the classroom, okay? If you can't find a school place, you can go to the zoo, teach them about animals, go to the farm, teach them about growing food, go to, there's, again, many different places in Dubai where you can receive an education without being in the classroom.
Yeah, I suppose education is like all around us, isn't it?
Yes.
And a lot of, children who aren't fitting in a mainstream setting, they do a homeschool. A lot of parents do homeschool if that isn't right for them. And I suppose it's understanding your child's need and kind of knowing what's going to be best for them. So education is, like you said, is all around us.
So and it's also not a sprint, it's a marathon. This is not, we've got to get in and we've got to sort it out by 16. I'm working with 10-year-old children that you've still got 6 years before traditional exams. I did my maths at 42, and my maths GCSE. I was already a fully qualified teacher. I couldn't put the dot on the I until I had my maths GCSE. 42. You can get GCSEs at any age.
Yes,
You can get into children who don't have any qualifications, but they get to 20 and they want to try university. You can still be admitted with no qualifications, and then you can do a foundation year. You can get up to scratch. Cognitive development happens for different stages for different people at different times. So just stop seeing it. It's not a race. It's a life. Learning is lifelong. Today we're talking. You're learning. I will talk to you. I will learn. That's education. So it's not a race. Just
And I love
relax.
that because it's like this, like again, the social pressures of you must go to nursery, you must go to school, you must go to university, you must do this, and get a job, and then retire at this age and do that.
It's so one-dimensional now, and I suppose that's not the way the world's going. No. We're all going to have to be flexible. We're going to have to accept that it's the world's going to be a different place.
But education systems were set up in the 40s.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're in the 21st century. It looks very different now, and I think that's one of the reasons we're really struggling is because we want different outcomes. And they're not currently available all the time.
Yeah.
But I've worked with children who have travelled the world for 3 years. They've packed up, they've got in a tent, they've got in a car, they've travelled the world for 3 years. They come back at 13, incredibly successful. And it teaches children to be creative and critical thinking and to look at the world in a really different way. And those are the thinkers we need for the 21st century.
Yeah,
Of course.
definitely.
And I love what you said earlier about, our youth of now are going to be the adults of, the next generation. That's what we're creating. So, those traditional ways of doing, we have to move. We have to move with the times. Not everybody, like you said, is going to learn in a classroom. People are hands-on, people are different. And that's whether or not you've got neurodiverse challenges or not. That's just anybody in general, isn't it? And it's open to everybody.
I think the school should replicate society. We have ballet dancers, we have singers, we have artists, we have technical people, we have writers. We do have doctors and bankers and lawyers, but they're a relatively small section of the community. And so if your child doesn't fit that A, B, C, D, let them be whoever they are, because when you've got happy children, you then have success. Unhappy children don't create success.
I love that line, and it's so true. And I think people like listening to this, we want them, don't take the pressure, like you said, the pressure's off. Don't feel like you need to be achieving this for your child, and if you're not, somehow you're failing at life. Not at all. If you, like you said, if you've got a happy child and you're nurturing them and keeping them safe and secure, that is going to form a lot of their adult years foundations that they need.
So it took me a long time to learn that. And I would say that as a young mum from 0 to 10 years old, I pushed him into OT, speech and language, and we were very one-directional. And it wasn't until I took my foot off the pedal and went, what would you like to do? I want to go and play with computers. Okay, fine, here's some tech, build a computer. Oh my goodness, look what you can do. And when I started to oh, you want to use a screwdriver? Oh, look, your fine motor skill just got a whole lot better. You want to, so developing him through his passions was definitely the turning point for me. And there's a program on Netflix called Love on the Spectrum. And there's a guy called Tanner, and his mum says exactly the same thing. He's got a lot of passion, a lot of empathy. He loves people. And when she started to develop that side of him, he actually flourished.
Wow.
So again, it's a really difficult journey.
Yeah.
It really is. And like I said, the journey is the thing, from being very young and, just trying to crisis manage a lot of situations. Let's be honest, I'm in that situation with my daughter.
Right.
And it's very much, you don't know what the unpredictability for me is the biggest like thing that gets me still. But she's very young, and I think as you get older, if you can keep those lines of communication open as best you can with your child or whoever it may be, it's important to like tap into what their passions are, because we all want to do something we enjoy and then we do it with a smile, rather than, you know, you must learn maths and your times tables, and it's like my brain doesn't process them, I can't do it, but I can cook a gorgeous cake and I'm only 10. You know, they're the things.
But we do have to learn math, and you can do that through cooking.
Exactly.
You've got your weights, you've got your numbers, you've got your adding, your
100%.
subtracting ingredients. It can be done in a really different way, and that's where the classroom might not fit, because we can't do that with 30 children. But there are alternatives that you can do.
So so going back to your thoughts on the UAE and how it's, you know, you believe it's at a good standard, and the government is pushing an initiative to encourage, you know, neurodiverse inclusivity. So would you say the schools are at a good level of inclusion, or is there room for improvements? And what kind of sticking points have you seen on your journey of?
That's like saying, do all supermarkets support the needs of all people?
Yeah.
So we have got some of the most phenomenal schools in the world, without a shadow of a doubt. And I travel the world. And so I was talking to a head of inclusion yesterday, whose year 2 year group, 6 classes, 32% are SEND. Okay, so we have some huge numbers, incredibly brilliant schools. We do have schools that are still developing, but that's always going to be the case, going to be the case. And when I was talking to her, we were discussing the pros and the cons of having that kind of number, because we're in a private education system. Schools don't have to fund our children.
No.
That's not what we've chosen. We've chosen to come to a private education system. And schools are not necessarily obligated to support our children. So the fact that they are is something they should be celebrated for, not hit on the head for. And so there is that element. There is a social justice element, and I think schools are doing a good job at that. But we do still have schools that are not quite there, and we're always going to have schools that are not quite there. Different curriculums, different cultures, different backgrounds. You're always going to. We have a diverse community, diverse children, diverse teachers, diverse schools.
It's always going to
be.
It's
about people choice.
Yeah, and like you said, everyone's still learning every day on their journey, and that's including schools. You know, a lot of them, like you said, the ones that are just starting the process, they're going to look very different in 10 years' time.
Yeah.
So from your perspective, what are the key important things that you're pushing at the moment? Are there certain things that you want to see in all schools eventually, if we got to that point?
I don't think I need to push anything, because I think that the government is very good at doing that for us. The inspection process is incredibly rigorous and thorough. I think what I would like to see in the world, in the community, is to stop trying to change us. I want them to change. Accept that a child might stim, accept a child might have a meltdown. Stop judging the parents for it. I think that acceptance around, it's not our fault that our children don't eat a widened variety of food. It's not our fault because that's the experience that I had, was he's not sleeping because I haven't put him in a routine. He's not eating because I'm not giving him diversity of food. He can't cope with them all because I'm not exposing him to life enough. And those messages are really damaging. It happens within the relationship, the marital relationship. It happens within society. It happens in the mall. And that's the shift. Accept that people are doing their best, because every single parent in the world is doing their best. And when people know better, they do better. And that goes for me too. I sit here with, my children are 27, so 20 years in education, 27 years as a parent of diversity. But I was identified at 50, autistic ADHD. So I have that lived experience of not knowing. And I didn't know until I was 50. And that's also quite shocking as a specialist. So having...
Did you have any inkling that you saw things differently?
No, I thought it was crazy.
Okay,
so bipolar disorder at 21.
Wow.
Borderline personality disorder at 25, 26.
Wow, yeah.
Depression 6 or 7 times I've been on medication. Okay. All of that evaporated when I went, aha. And that's
sense.
Working with it and seeing it and knowing it and understanding it. And still... I never put the mirror on myself, and I don't think we do as adults. And when I rang a friend of mine who runs a brilliant educational psychology and OT and therapy centre. And I rang her, having worked with her for 10 years, and said, because my children said, Mum, go. And I was like, okay. So I rang her and said, my children think. And she said, you didn't know? And I was like, no, I didn't know. And she said, oh, we all thought you knew. Okay. But it was never discussed, never talked about. It was just, we accept you for who you are. And that was a turning point. That's when I decided to stop trying to fit into organisations and into schools, stop trying to change it from the inside, come out, do your thing, work for yourself. And I might not have a salary, but I am 100% happier now than I've ever been in my life, because I'm doing me.
Yeah.
And that's the vital thing. And the people I surround myself with accept me. And that has been totally empowering and brings me to things like this today.
It's amazing.
And you've taken all that energy and put it into something that's going to change things for the future in a huge scale. I think it's quite interesting what you said about the late diagnosis. I speak to friends and families who may feel like their child has additional needs but is maybe not wanting to go down the road, and I sometimes think, does it give you more validation? Is it better to go down and try and explore the fact, have they or have they not got a diagnosis coming from?
So all of us label everyone all of the time.
Yeah.
So if I think about my childhood, I on LinkedIn, I put my school report from 1981, about 3 weeks ago, my school report, and it said, great in conversation. Oh, look, I am.
Here we are.
But really bad at writing down and communicating my thoughts, using vocabulary as poor, all of those communication challenges that autistic people have. And so it was there in 81. But I've always labelled myself stupid, bipolar, this, depressive, crazy, challenges with friendships. Loss of friendships, I'm divorced, all of these things come into play. So those labels in replacement for an autism label, I would 100%. It allows us the ability to support properly rather than just hit us on the head with negativity. It's not necessary.
I agree. And I think that was one of my motivations for when I, went down the path of getting my daughter, assessed and all the process. It's hard. It's a hard process, and it's not as
emotional.
Easy. It's emotional, and it's really tough. But for me, like you said, I didn't want her to be labelled as the one who couldn't sit still, the one who couldn't concentrate, the one who was a picky eater, the one who was like all the labels you've just discussed. For me, for her to understand herself and tap in and look into what's going to work for the way her brain works was way more important than me thinking, oh gosh, are we going to have this stigma of a label for
100%.
me? But I appreciate some parents aren't there, and it's a difficult journey.
Going through that process reminded me so much about how hard it is to go through that process. I was sitting talking to her and I was thinking, am I making this up because I know so much about it? Will I be seen as a fraud? Will I be seen as jumping on the bandwagon? I've made my whole life around neurodiversity, and now suddenly I get this label.
Okay.
So there was a lot of imposter syndrome, a lot of, but when she started picking it apart, I was like, yeah, that was in childhood. Did I sleep? No.
Yeah.
Did, the ADHD part of me, fidgety, unable to focus. I would cram for exams at midnight till 3 a.m. and then go and sit an exam at 7 and be very successful, even though I don't think I learned anything in the classroom. Wow. All of those indicators and presentations have been there all of my life. So therefore I now sit very comfortably with it, but the process was and when I actually got my identification, I didn't tell anyone for 6 months. I didn't tell my mum for 6 months because I couldn't. I think I told my partner, but apart from that, I don't even think I told my children immediately because I couldn't sit well with it.
I was going to say, what was it that stopped you from wanting to?
Imposter syndrome. I didn't want to be seen as a fraud or a fake because I'm too ethical for that.
Yeah, of course.
So I had to process it and sit with it. And children, especially teenagers that get that identification, they do this. I've watched it time and time again. They have to sit with it, explore it, research it, find out more about it. And when it sits comfortably, they will be ready to speak about it. Because you talk about your daughter. So when my son was 12, 13, he told me to stop talking about him because I would do assemblies. He said, Mum, stop it. I don't want this in my life. I don't want people to hear from me. So it was only when he then turned about 24, he said, okay, now you can start talking about, and I've actually got him to sign a disclosure now to say that I can talk about him freely, because he now has consent. When they're under 21, I would say they probably don't have consent. So parents need to be careful with who they say what to and when and why and how. So,
and it's interesting, and like you said, when they become more aware of who they are, it's like they don't want to be the one talked about as like an example. Like my daughter, she might not be comfortable with me saying she does this, she does that, she does this. Whereas
to have
now,
that conversation with her.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And we're all learning, and they're changing, and we're changing, the world's changing. It's really interesting.
So we usually ask all our guests like a final question of what would you like to see of changing in the world, but we've already answered that kind of. So I'm kind of interested to know like what, moving to it, there's a lot, it's a very expat heavy country, UAE, and, moving to a new country and a new education system, which has got a variety of different curriculums and stuff. And if, it's you're coming here with a child with neurodiverse needs, what kind of are the first steps you'd advise someone like pre-moving here, whilst they're here on maybe looking at educational settings?
Understand your child. Make sure that you've got up-to-date reports from whichever country you're coming from. Try not to pay for too much, because once you arrive here, they may want you to then have to pay here. So get as much evidence of their need as you can, collate it together. You get all your paperwork together, your visas, your copies of your passports, copy of EdSpsych, speech and language. What we want to see in schools is how much progress have they made from early identification. So if we know that the child has autism at 3 or 4 and you're presenting me with a 10-year-old, I want to know what they were like and what they're like now, because I want to see how much progress, because then I can relatively predict what they're going to need for the next 6 or 7 years. When I'm taking a child, when I was a head of inclusion taking a child, I wanted to know that I could support them this year, but also for the next however long they were with me. If they were going to be with me for 6 years or 10 years, I want to be able to predict, do they need ASDAN? Do they need BTEC qualifications? Do they need vocational pathways? Do they need occupational therapy throughout, speech and language therapy? What do they need? So as a head of inclusion, I would be very careful about making sure I can meet those needs, not just for a year, but for 6 years or 10 years, however long that child may or may not stay with me. So collate all your data together, present it in a really positive way, be supportive, communicate. Don't get angry. If a school says no, they are doing it for your best interest, however painful that is. Then speak to a professional, an EdPsych or an OT, and find out what the barriers are. Ask for feedback from the heads of inclusion. Why can't you support them? What can I do to support my child to be successful in another location? Communicate, just communicate, talk to people, but don't take it personally, even though it feels really personal. We are not saying that your child is not good enough for our school. We are saying our school is not good enough for your child. There's a huge difference.
Yeah, and I suppose parents take it personally because, it's rejection.
It's rejection.
It's another rejection, and it's a lot. They're already going through a lot of emotions, and on top of that, they're having to kind of deal with rejection from school. But as you said, it's a really good example that it's they're rejecting on the basis of your child.
Shift the mindset.
Yeah, shift the mindset. It's not a rejection. It's your child.
They're being
not
honest.
Thrive
They're being honest, and that might be painful.
It's a protection, kind of.
And it is painful, but they're being honest.
Yeah, and long term, that's what you need.
It is.
Because there is no, we've all seen probably or know of people in example where they've been in the wrong setting, and they kind of, the damage that can cause long term is not worth it. So if, like you said, the school know if they can or can't meet the needs, listen and, make your decisions going forward. But communication is key in all aspects of this.
Yeah, that's great.
So you've given us so much there, so much food for thought. And obviously you provide a consultancy service. So would you be in a position to go into schools with families, or how does your kind of consultancy work?
Yep, I do have a consultancy. I have a centre where we work directly with children, so supporting children who can't find school places. So this summer I had 3 families that couldn't, so we put together a small class just for a couple of hours a day, just to tide them over. We did some literacy and some numeracy, got them out of the house, kept them in school routine, especially when siblings were going to school. It was very hard. And through working with them, we were able to place all 3 by the end of September, which was awesome.
Incredible.
So I kind of do myself out of business because I bring people in, but then I get them off my books
Really
as quickly as possible because I want to do that. That for me is the success. So not good as a business model, but great for...
But it's ethical, like you said.
Great for society. So we do work directly with children. We do one-to-one. So children that are in a mainstream school but might need a little top-up on science or a little top-up on emotions or behaviour. And we're non-clinical. So we are not clinical in any way. None of our team are therapists. All of our team are educators and who are able in a one-to-one setting to teach in a different way. So instead of classroom delivery, we can do it through fun. Then we work with parents, so we guide those conversations. Why is it a challenge? What do you need to do? How can you help your child? And a lot of it is talking them down. This is a marathon, not a sprint. Stop taking it personally. A lot of it is emotional support. I've worked with families in crisis. So a very successful family recently came to me. They were arguing, they were fighting, they were breaking furniture in the house. The parents were really unable to connect with the children. So we picked them all off, worked with all of them individually, and then brought them together for some group stuff. And they've now gone off. Again, bad business model.
No, phenomenal outcome for the family.
They've gone and been successful. So every person, every child, every family that comes to me with something different. Yeah. Majority of my time is spent consulting in schools. I do school improvement. I do inspection work. I train teachers and I try and help teachers to provide that more inclusive society inside their classroom. So that's where I spend most of my week. But the centre is open 7 days a week. We do whatever we can do, and I'm doing a big project at the moment with one of the Emirates on teacher training and head of inclusion training. So again, it's all sections of the society. So
I was going to say you've literally got your hands in every part of it.
This is the whole point about inclusion. It does take the community. So I don't see it as different sections. I don't see the children as separate from the parents, to the teachers, to the schools, to the owners of the schools, through to the government. That we are one community and everybody has a part. In a school, we would call that the team around the child in the centre. You've got your teacher, you've got your medical team, your counselling team, your therapist team, your educational psychologist, your teachers. If you're in secondary, you have 14 teachers minimum. Okay. So and then you've got your head of inclusion, you might have a learning assistant. It's a massive team and everyone has a part to play in the success of that child. So I just see it as one. So I see myself as an inclusionist. That's what I do and support everyone.
Like you say, like when you were saying that, in my mind, I just vision the child as the heart. The other organisation as the liver, and then the kidney, and then it's like a whole body.
It's organic, and we all have to come together because if we don't, you can't change. There's no point in having a wheelchair accessible school and then not having an accessible classroom or a teacher that knows to, I worked with a child who had low cognitive ability, epilepsy, autism and ADHD. And you've got to watch for the signs of, when is he having an episode? When is he not able to listen to me? It's not his fault if he's missing the content of the lesson because he couldn't actually listen because he was in the middle of an episode. And some of these things are really subliminal. And you have to, and it's exhausting to be a teacher, to have to tune in all the time to 30 children. And they're not given enough credit. They're not given enough credit. It's a really hard job. And then I hear things like, they have 2 months of summer holidays. But if they didn't, they wouldn't get through the year.
The burnout would be...
Why do we have a break after 6 weeks? Because we're exhausted from all of the paperwork needs redoing, all of the planning needs redoing. And yes, that is our job. And yes, it is our passion, as teachers.
But it's still intensive.
It's very intensive.
And it's hard. And like you said, they don't get enough credit.
You want the teachers to be in the best possible mental health, physical health, because without that, they're the linchpin of the classroom.
Exactly. The nurturing can't happen if,
So a very underrated profession.
Yeah, I agree.
As someone who stepped out after 20 years, because I think there does come a time where you just can't do that level of intensity continuously every day, all of the time, and get to school before the traffic starts to build up.
That is an added pressure. Thank you so much for being here today. Honestly, like I said, it's been really insightful. Hopefully our subscribers are able to take some of that information and implement it into their own lives, or reach out to you individually. We'll have your information.
I'm not the only one in the city.
No, there's lots, but it's amazing just to hear it from you as somebody who deals with it day in, day out. So thank you for being
Very
here
well.
today.
Lovely
Thank
to
you for
meet
the
you,
invite, and
Louise.
good luck with your future projects.
Thank you so much.
Amazing.
You too.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.